I've been wanting to do some revisit shows for quite some time now. You know, go back into the archives and then update some old shows with some new information, because a lot of stuff has happened in the past 3 some odd years. It's gaming, that happens. This particular show was spurred on by this. A couple of years ago I did an episode called There Is No Going Home, and in it I talked about retro gaming. Specifically, how playing a game in an emulator or ISO or ROM, whatever, it's not the same experience that we had back in the day. You shouldn't play Pitfall in WASD, that's all I'm saying. So let's fast forward to a couple weeks ago. I was doing a charity live stream and I was playing the original Legend of Zelda on an NES emulator. The mapping on my Xbox 360 controller was just completely wonky, so I had to go back to my keyboard layout just to keep playing. And I said on the live stream that playing on the keyboard isn't the same as playing on the old flat panel NES controllers, and I thought nothing more of it. Then about a week later, 2 friends of mine, completely independent of each other, sent me these. These are NES controllers that are USB compatible. And then one of my friends also sent me this, because Uniracers in DK country. This changes things. Well, I suppose we should talk about these controllers first. These actually made me go dive into the storage closet and dig out my old NES controller to compare them to. Both these controllers are made by different companies and they have very different feels to them. The first one is by Tommy and it has a very crisp feel to it. The buttons are stiff, they feel sturdy, and it feels like a brand new NES controller. The other one's by Retrolink, and it feels more like a well-used, broken-in controller with a lot softer buttons. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. The softer feel is nice for reflexive games like Battletoads, and the stiffer one's really nice for long burner games like Mario Bros. 2. When you put them next to an original NES controller, it's almost impossible to tell them apart by feel. Okay, the Retrolink has rubber select and start buttons, and the Tommy has plastic ones, but other than that, they are identical. The weight, the size, the button layout, the decorative sticker. I mean, even if you turn them over, they have the same recessed spot that Nintendo uses for their info. For all intents and purposes, these are the same things. More than a little bit of care went into actually replicating every single detail of the original NES controller for a modern purpose. And it's led me to reconsider my position and ask one pretty vital question here. Why do these even exist? Okay, to be fair, the concept is not exactly new. I found video on YouTube from 2007 of a guy using an NES USB controller that he built himself in 2002, along with a tutorial that he made on how to DIY if you're so inclined. But when I did my show in 2012, I hadn't actually seen anything like this. They did exist, though. I found a review video from 2011, but they were flying well under the radar. But once you find one, then you find them all, because I found USB gamepads for just about every old system that was out there, as well as adapters for your old gamepads so you can plug them into USB ports. Again, these are new products aimed at modern gamers. Modern gamers playing emulated games on PCs. Modern gamers who have games that we couldn't even dream about in the 1980s. Modern gamers who have access to free games that blow these old titles to 8 bits. I can take the easy way out and say this is all nostalgia, but I don't know. Well, first of all, emulation of old games is a pretty specialized thing. Most people in my generation who grew up on these games either don't know about it or they just don't care. Either that or they still have their old systems and they play the original games on the original consoles. As I observed in the original show, though, it's getting harder to do this. A lot of modern TVs may not have analog inputs, let alone an antenna. I mean, you can make the old hardware play nice with the new hardware and build a rat's nest behind your TV. And let's be honest, a lot of people just don't have the patience to do this. You gotta be pretty hardcore to make a 1980s NES talk to a 2015 HD TV. Besides, there are simpler solutions. Most of the old NES games are available on the Wii. Old PlayStation games can be bought on PS3 and pretty soon, from what I understand, on the PS4. My sister bought an Atari plug-and-play. It's 10 games inside of a joystick and you just plug it into a TV. That's about half a shoebox of games for you old-timers out there. And that's even assuming that my generation even wants to play these old games. If my Facebook is any indication, all my friends are happy playing social media and Skinner box games right now. What I'm getting at is that people of my generation, generally speaking, are not going to go retro quite the same way. If they do, they're going to do it on a smartphone app, or they're going to go through a system that they already know, or they're going to probably go to the Internet Archive because somebody Facebooked about it and so whatever. So it kind of leads to the question then, who's this thing actually aimed at? I'm guessing the younger generation of gamers. Okay, I could kind of take a cheap route and say it's all hipsters, you know, wearing fedoras and scarves, sipping PBR, and playing these old games ironically, or whatever they're supposed to do. I don't get hipsters, so I'm going to stick to something a little more, relevant. I just kind of have to look at the big picture to kind of explain this. This video is being made in March of 2015, and you take a quick look at the release calendar for Nintendo family of games, and you start to see a trend. There's a lot of old franchises on the main page, and even more when you dig into it. Granted, Nintendo is kind of riding their Super Plumber Brothers franchise for all that it's worth, but that's kind of the point. A lot of kids, and I want to emphasize kids, are playing the new game and saying, hey, this is cool, so where did this come from? So they look into the past, find the old games, and go, ooh, cool, I can play this. And then they quickly download an emulator, and they've got game. And they're literally in the history of video games. When you think about it, there's not too many other places that you can actually walk through history. I mean, I can teach a kid the Konami code. But I think there's more to it than that, because these old NES titles have this reputation for brutality. When you talk to the old guard of gamers, they just love to tell you about how the old NES games are so hard and how the new games suck. Well, okay, they got a point about the old games being hard. NES games were made with this sort of arcade mentality combined with making the most of the limits of the cartridge. So to that end, games were made to be unforgiving to the player. You touch something, you die. You jump wrong, you die. You misjudge the angle and go off the side of the world, you die. And no checkpoints, no saves, no continues. 3 lives, back to the beginning. This was by design. They could add hours of gameplay by making the game just more brutal. The trade-off was frustration. You see, a lot of these games were not designed to be beaten. Okay, a lot of games did have endings to them, but those endings were lame. It was just the word congratulations written on the screen. Oftentimes misspelled. So most people didn't finish most of the games in their library. Now awaiting the humble braggers to start posting in 3, 2, 1... So let's just say for a moment it is a younger generation rediscovering the old school. I mean, they're watching videos and listening to the old timers, and there's probably an interest in doing it authentically. If you're going to do it right. So you've got choices. You can go to a used game store and hope they have an old NES that works and is for sale. You can go to eBay and take your chances, or you have emulation. And let's face it, for a modern generation, emulators are just really easy to use and get. So naturally, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And I have played a NES on a keyboard. It's just not the same. I mean, depending on the game, it's easier or it's harder. I mean, hell, I've even played Mario 3 on the Wii. Definitely not the same. The response was just way too slow. So what you gotta do is you gotta get the old-style flat panel controllers just to really understand it. And they're just something you can't explain unless you've done it for yourself. Like when I play, I have to overhand a controller because I've got huge paws. You can't explain it, you just have to do it. So as far as explanations as to why this exists, yeah, I totally can buy into that. You know, got a bunch of younger generation gamers who want to learn the secrets of the ancients, and they go blow off the dusty tomes of the old video games to learn the secrets of the side-scroller. It's like Sanskrit, but cooler. Whatever the reason, I'm actually really happy these things exist. In the old show, I had concluded that you can't recapture the flavor of the old games, and unless you've ever risked electrocution to play video games, you still really can't. But having an authentic controller so you can play like we did back in the day, it's probably as close as we're going to get, and I'm okay with that. But more than that, it's important these games get played. Gaming is pretty unique in that our history is reachable. You don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars like classic car owners or historical reenactors. Video game players can still experience arcades. In some places, you can still play the old games on the proper interfaces. So even if that's not its purpose, I think that's why these things exist. It's gamers living our own history. So when you think about it, there's really no reason to not play the old games, especially in the old-fashioned way. Yeah, for the younger gamers, you hear a lot of us old-timers go, oh, these new games are so easy, they coddle you, the old games are so much harder, yeah, blah, 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 uphill both ways, snowstorm, we've heard it before. In a way, I kind of envy the younger generation. You don't have to wear the nostalgia goggles that the old generation puts on your head. You can actually grab stuff like this and play the old games for yourselves. And that's pretty awesome.